Good morning, everyone. And as I said, I've never had an intro like that, and that makes me feel a little bit old as well, hearing that CV. I'm speaking in front of two audiences today. This morning, yourself, and today I'm also hosting Network Rail Board in Birmingham, Mr. Hendy and all of his crew. And I can honestly say you are the more intimidating of those two audiences that I've got today. And I can tell because everyone's just staring at me now. But three things I wanted to talk to you about this morning, give you my views on. Firstly, just a little bit about me and why I really personally value what you all do and what I've learned and become curious about in the discipline of track. I'd like to talk to you about some of the phenomenal achievements that we've had in recent years. And then I'll talk about the very, very real challenges we face in a very, in a changing environment that our railway's in at the moment, and will be in for certainly the next decade. So it's a little bit about me, and that little intro talked a little bit about my apprenticeship. I was a mechanical engineer and apprentice, not in rail, it was actually forklift truck manufacturing, where I was an apprentice. I stumbled into railways because there wasn't a job for me at the end of my apprenticeship, but they said, we'll sponsor you to go to university. So I ended up going to university, and then I realised that going back to sitting behind a drawing board in Basingstoke, which is where I was doing my apprenticeship, wasn't much of a future. And I stumbled into railways, and I stumbled into overhead line engineering, as it happens at the time, not track necessarily. But when I moved to become a route managing director in the old L&E and EM route in 2016, I think that was, I began to learn about track. And actually, what I love about track, I think it's a particularly fascinating engineering subject. And I think the complexities of track, the dynamics of how it works, if you're into engineering, are just fascinating. And if I had my time again, I would probably like to have spent more time studying about the very things that you deal with day in, day out, and the asset that you look after. I think track is a fascinating topic, which is why I was really pleased to get the approach from John to come and speak about that today. And one of the quotes I often say about one of the things that frustrates me in Network Rail is that we're quite, all of you in the room, we give you safety of the line accountability. But then that's it, don't we? We don't give you any more accountability, and we don't give you fiscal accountability, or we don't give you other accountabilities, but we do hold you to account, and you do hold, I think, one of the most important roles we've got in the industry, and making sure that the track is fit for passage of trains. And that's something I'd like to change a bit more in Network Rail. One of the things I did in L&E and East Midlands, when I realised a little bit about how things worked, is that a lot of the track maintenance engineers in the business didn't have any capital funding, and we very quickly allocated some money to that, and we're starting to look at how we address that in North West and Central, because I think we need to give you complete accountability, not just sole accountability when it comes to safety of the line. So a little bit about what I think you've achieved and where we are now, and there's two things I think are huge, absolutely huge. So one of the problems in my job is there's loads of ex-railway people offering you loads of really bad advice. And what I mean by that is they're normally more senior folk than us. I still get really, really good advice from some retired TMEs that I keep in touch with, sometimes contact me and just nudge me in the right direction, and I value that. What I don't value is who remembers John Armitt? Does anyone remember John Armitt? He was Chief Executive and Chair. Good if you remember John. He was riding up and down the East Coast main line and took it upon himself to email Peter Hendy to say the track quality is not what it was. It's not what it was. And I got, I think Pete Cushion was the regional or route track engineer then, got him to go and look at some stats. And we had to just point out to John that while he was running the railway, there was about 100 rail breaks a year on East Coast. And in that year, I think we had just got to single digits on East Coast in terms of rail breaks. And I said, I think you find the rail quality might be because you're sitting over the bogey, John. That's what's spilling your first class coffee, not because of the quality of the track. Why I think that's really important and relevant. If you look back in time, and John and I have had to do a bit of this with challenging from the, helpful and healthy challenge by trade union colleagues. If you look at the overall quality of our track and how it's improved over the last probably 2 decades, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. The quality of the track is in a great place. And one of the things I really like about I've seen in North West and Central, other than the issue we had at Primrose Tunnel yesterday afternoon, is track quality is in a good place, and where it's not in a good place, largely the teams know about it and they're doing something about it, and that's really pleasing. So I think where we've been in terms of quality of track as Network Rail and where we are now are worlds apart, and worlds apart in a really good way, and you should all be very proud about that, because I don't think it's talked about enough. I really don't think it's talked about enough, the fact that rail brakes are at so low, despite all the challenges, the changes in rolling stock, what's happened in the environment. There's not enough, frankly, patting on backs to say we're doing a bloody good job, and you should be proud of that. The other thing, to be in that place when we've took the action that we have done in the last control period to eliminate red zone working, makes that achievement all the more remarkable to me. One of the hardest decisions the executive I'm part of ever made was that push to eliminate red zone working. I can remember the conversations I had with my route directors at the time. I remember the conversations I had with myself at the time was the right thing. I can remember the conversations I had with section managers around what was then Eastern Region for me about that time and that change, and the conversations we still have about it. But one of the most important conversations that I ever had about that was I can remember going to Doncaster. Has anyone from Doncaster made it down yet? No, they won't come this far, will they? But they don't like leaving the mines. But but I remember going to Doncaster in the wake of Margam when Gareth and Spike lost their lives, and sat there with a section manager who I know really well, and they said, no, it wouldn't happen here, Rob. Wouldn't happen here. It wouldn't happen here. And then within weeks, they had an incredibly close near miss at Doncaster Station, an incredibly close near miss. Thankfully, at that point, they woke up. Thankfully, at that point, they woke up and realised, no, we need to, they realised that no matter how good you might think you are, no matter how professional you might think you are still human, which means you're fallible, which means at some point you will make a mistake. And therefore, taking the decision that we did to eliminate red zone work, which has hurt immensely and continues to hurt, and I'll come to that in a moment, continues to hurt, was absolutely the right and necessary thing to do so that none of our colleagues lost their lives in the way Gareth and Spike did. But on that, please don't think that either that's forgotten or the consequence of that is underestimated. One of the things I constantly talk to with my teams is, are we going back and really understanding how that change has impacted what we offer? Because there will be things that we don't yet see, I don't see, as a consequence of that change. And we've got to be vigilant of those, because whilst we eliminated one risk, we've created a multitude of others. We've created a multitude of others. So I think it's been a brilliant thing that we've done. I think it's a seismic shift in the safety profile of our people. It's not without its consequence, and we've got to stay vigilant as a result of that. But if you think about the quality of the track, the change in the safety profiles, we should be really, really proud about what the track community has achieved. In the 10 years I've been relatively close to it as a maintenance community, it's been brilliant, and thank you very much for that. The third area I wanted to cover is just looking forward. So I've just been through the experience, I'll call it, of my second control period, wrestle with Treasury, government, DFT, regulators, technical authority, John, and we've got a plan, and we've got a plan that's in place. But when I look forward into this next control period, I think we've got challenges that are of an extent that none of us have really experienced before. And what I mean by that, twofold. The financial settlement we've got, if you listen to the politicians, they'll say it's broadly the same amount of money. It's broadly the same amount of money it was 10 years ago. It's not the same amount of money it is now. So it's a very, very fiscally tight settlement that we've got. And we've got that in the face of a very different and changing context of what the weather is doing to our railways and exposing our railway. You will all know better than me, one of the risks you're probably all having to think about and worry about is what's happening to the formation underneath the track, what's happening to the substructure, how's that moving, what's happening to the embankments. We are at a time when we've spent a lot of money on track and signalling and other assets over the years. We've got the same amount of money to keep spending, but we're seeing different asset types change where we're going to have to spend that money. We've just come through the wettest winter that any of us, there's no one over 150 years old, I don't think, since records began, that any of us have ever experienced. It's incredible. It's not over yet. There's more rain coming over the Midlands today. And that's changing the shape of the risk profile, and it's changing the shape of what we do, which means it's going to change how we prioritise and spend our money. So the risk that we now look into, we're going to have to think differently about how we spend the money that we've got. And when it comes back to track, I think there are still lots of opportunities in track on how we can be more efficient and more effective. I happened to stumble into a meeting room in King's Cross 2 weeks ago and saw Cinch in there, the regional track engineer, talking to Jake Kelly, my successor in Eastern, on just what they're doing with the Class 153, I think it is, that's running around doing the BVI type things on crossings. And I was looking at some of the images of the crossings there, that there is more technology available to us in order to be more efficient and more effective in how we deal with the track. One of the things I've picked up when I've been going out to deliver units, and I picked it up a bit when I went to Warrington, is that one thing the business has got to get right this year is that it's no good just overwhelming you all with lots of data and making it hard for you to see the issues. We've got to use technology to make it easier to filter the data to get to where you need it to be. And I was having a conversation with Julia Terrick last night, who, for those you don't know, works in route services and is looking at the next generation of infrastructure monitoring fleet. And I said, can you please just write the first requirement in whatever you take to market is we've got to make it easier for the track maintenance community. That's what it's there to do. I said, it needs to be reliable, and it needs to give the track maintenance engineer the information they need to make the judgment calls they need to do on their track and the ever-changing dynamic of track. So I think, to summarise, I've just got huge respect for what you do. I think of all the engineering disciplines, one of the great things about my job is you get to learn lots of new things. I'm deeply curious. The one thing I would have liked to have been a track engineer if I had my time again. I think it's a fascinating subject. And credit to you all and what we've achieved in the last 10 years. I don't think there's enough recognition of that, which is one of the reasons I want to come and speak today. And thirdly, as we look into the next control period, we're going to have to look at the risk profile that we're presented with as the environment changes on the railway, and we're going to have to move quickly to keep up with that, because at the moment I think we're a little bit behind the curve. But above all, you should all be really, really proud about what you've achieved. And because of that achievement, I know we're really well placed for a very successful CP7 and CP8. Thank you.